Look at the timestamp of this video. More than 60 minutes. Your fractured, dopamine-addicted brain is already screaming at you to click away. You have been conditioned to consume your philosophy in 60-second, brightly colored, bite-sized pieces of digital trash. You want cheap motivation. You want a quick psychological hack to feel better about yourself while your reality continues to rot. If that is what you are looking for, leave now. This is not a podcast. This is not background noise for your morning commute. This is a 1-hour uninterrupted neurobiological surgery, and it is going to be incredibly uncomfortable. 95% of the people who clicked on this video will not make it to the end. Their egos will shatter. Their defense mechanisms will violently reject the cold diagnosis. They will run back to the endless algorithmic feed the exact moment the iron scalpel touches their deepest illusions. But if you are still here, if you are truly exhausted from being a pathetic hostage to your own panic, your endless anxiety, and the rotting ghosts of your past, then sit down and do not move. For the next hour, we are going to systematically dismantle the architecture of your suffering. We are going to walk through the 6 locked rooms of your mind. We will dissect the default mode network that tortures you in the silence. We will sever the biological Wi-Fi that infects you with the toxic neuroses of society. We will crush the phantoms of your future, rip out the arrogance of your control, practice the alchemy of decay, and forge the heavy iron handbrake to stop your panic entirely. Put your phone in another room, close every other tab. The heavy iron doors of the citadel are locking. Let the surgery begin. Welcome to room 1. Look at your hands. Look at that pathetic, barely perceptible tremor in the tips of your fingers. Feel the dull, leaden exhaustion permanently tattooed into the bags under your eyes. Every single morning, the alarm clock drives into your temple like a rusted iron nail, and you wake up feeling as though you have just lost a brutal, bloody war that you cannot even remember fighting. You look out at this world and you see nothing but an infinite slaughterhouse. You see a collapsing economy, fabricated social constructs, biological decay, and the inevitable asphyxiating weight of human suffering waiting to crush you at every single corner. And how does your psyche respond to this absolute terror? It constructs a desperate, cowardly hallucination. You tell yourself that you are simply broken. You justify your weakness with a chemical imbalance, a unique psychological disease, a cursed, inescapable fate. You proudly declare, I am an anxious person. I am heavily depressed. I am utterly fragile. That is a lie. An absolute, pathetic, venomous lie. You are not broken. You are simply possessed. You have voluntarily allowed a biological phantom, a pathetic parasite, to take the steering wheel of the magnificent, terrifying machinery of your body. You are a sovereign king who has willingly handed his heavy iron crown to a worm. Look at the thick dust slowly settling on the heavy oak wood of this table. Watch the smoke from the candle dissolve into the eternal, absolute shadows of my archive. You made it inside. Sit down and remain completely silent. Today, we're going to dissect the most sophisticated, beautifully disguised illusion that your own biology has ever successfully constructed. We are going to perform a ruthless autopsy on the ghost you mistakenly call me. To completely destroy an enemy, you must understand its anatomy down to the smallest capillaries. We must look at the cold, unforgiving, sterile science of your daily suffering. Modern neurobiology has a very specific name for your demon. They call it the default mode network. The DMN. It is a massive chaotic web of interconnected neurons inside your skull. But here is the terrifying, undeniable truth about it. This network only activates when you are doing absolutely nothing, when you are not fighting for your immediate survival, when you are not actively hunting, when you are not building an empire. Your default mode network turns on. It is simply the idling engine of your biological machine. Let us drag this sterile science down from the lofty heavens of the laboratory and slam it directly onto your filthy kitchen table. Imagine this. It is Sunday afternoon. You are sitting on your soft, comfortable couch. The temperature in the room is absolutely perfect. You have plenty of food rotting in your refrigerator. You are completely undeniably safe from any predators. There is zero physical threat to your life. And yet, suddenly, your chest tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow and erratic. A cold, sticky sweat breaks out on the back of your neck. Your brain begins generating horrifying, apocalyptic scenarios about a corporate meeting on Tuesday, about a total financial collapse next year, about that idiotic argument you had 3 years ago. Why does this happen? Because your biological machine is terrified to death of peace. For millions of years of brutal evolution, if a primate completely relaxed under a tree, it was eaten alive by a tiger. Your brain is hardwired to constantly scan the environment for threats, and when there is no real physical danger, your default mode network simply manufactures fake danger to keep you sharp and on edge. It generates a continuous, irritating electrical noise, but your ego, your incredibly arrogant, fragile ego, takes that random, absolutely meaningless electrical noise of neurons firing and says, "Oh, that is me. Those are my profound thoughts. That's my reality." You're standing treacly next to the running engine of a car, greedily inhaling the toxic, burning exhaust fumes and convincing yourself that you are the smoke. You are not the smoke. You are the empty space in which the smoke appears. But we must push our iron scalpel even deeper. We must consult the ancient dark philosophy of the East. Over 2,500 years ago, long before the invention of MRI machines and neurological mapping, the Buddhist monks of the Dark Zen tradition discovered this exact same default mode network. They called it the monkey mind. But I prefer a much more accurate, much more terrifying term. It is a linguistic parasite. Listen to the friction of the words you use every single day. Look at the poison you voluntarily inject into your own veins every time you open your mouth. You say, "I am anxious." You say, "I am depressed." You say, "I am a failure." Look at the monstrous, staggering arrogance of those phrases. You take a temporary shifting chemical reaction in your nervous system, a reaction that lasts mere seconds, and you permanently weld it to your core identity. You are letting the parasite wear your skin. I want you to visualize the visceral, physiological reality of exactly what you are doing. Imagine a massive, dark, slippery leech, a parasite made of thick black oil and sharp, rusted iron teeth. When a stressful thought arises in your head, a thought about your drained bank account, about your ruined relationships, about your wasted time, that thought is just a fleeting shadow. But the exact second you say, "I am a failure," you literally pick up this black parasite with your bare hands and violently shove it deep into your own chest. You allow its teeth to sink into your heart. You let it drink the heavy, golden blood of your life force. It feeds exclusively on your identification. The more you believe that the thought is you, the larger and fatter the ghost becomes. It grows heavy. It grows unbearably dense, until eventually it violently tears the host apart from the inside out. I am looking directly into the rotting core of your psychology right now. You are not a victim of your anxiety. You are its most generous sponsor. You are voluntarily funding the very terrorist organization that is methodically destroying your own mind. You are feeding the ghost. And do you want to know why? Because without this familiar pain, you would have to face the terrifying existential void. Feeling this suffering is like swallowing crushed glass, but for your bloated ego, it is still better than admitting your own absolute insignificance. I know the temperature in this room is dropping. I know your ego is screaming in pure panic right now. Your mind is violently rejecting this surgical operation. It is generating thousands of pathetic rationalizations. It whispers to you, "My pain is different. My trauma is unique. This system was designed specifically to break me. I have every right to my suffering." You desperately want to believe that your pain makes you special. It does not. It makes you absolutely boringly predictable. Do not dare to think for a single second that you are the first human being to feel the crushing weight of this ghost. Look at the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He commanded the greatest, most powerful empire in the history of mankind. He held absolute, unquestionable power over life and death. And yet, he sat in a freezing, mud-soaked military tent in the dark forests of Germania, surrounded by rotting corpses, plague, and betrayal. And he fought the exact same biological phantom that you fight on your soft, comfortable couch. His default mode network screamed at him to drop everything and quit. His brain generated endless thoughts of despair, of suicide, of total capitulation. The parasite tried to rip the crown from his head. Your brain is melting right now. I can see it. You are getting far too uncomfortable with my words. Your hand is already instinctively reaching for the mouse or the glowing screen of your smartphone. You want to minimize this window, escape into the safe, numbing loop of short videos and drown this tension in cheap digital dopamine. Leave the phone alone. Take your hand off the mouse. Look me directly in the eyes. We are not finished here. If you run away right now, the ghost wins. If you close this video, you are officially signing a confession that you are nothing but a weak, domesticated slave to your own neurology. Sit in the fire. We must forge your weapon. You cannot shoot a ghost with an iron bullet. You cannot punch a phantom in the face. If you fight your thoughts, if you try to forcefully suppress your anxiety, you are still interacting with the parasite. You are still feeding it your vital energy. The only way to kill a ghost is to stop believing in it. You must master the architecture of Dark Zen, the ancient art of absolute detached observation. You must become the sky. When a violent black storm gathers on the horizon, the sky does not panic. The sky does not say, I am the hurricane. I am the lightning. I am the destruction. The sky simply exists, facing, empty, and absolutely invulnerable. The storm rages, the thunder rips the air apart, the rain falls, and then, by the inevitable biological law of impermanence, the storm dies, and the sky remains exactly as it was. Unharmed, untouched. Tomorrow morning you will step out into the arena of your office, your relationship, or your market. And the phantom will strike. A crisis will happen. Your chest will tighten. The electrical noise of your default mode network will skyrocket. The parasite will whisper, "We are in extreme danger. We have failed." Panic. In that exact fraction of a second, I command you to sever the identification. You will never again say, "I am panicking." You will gather all the cold stone density of a sovereign king, and you will state internally, "Right now, my biological machine is generating the emotion of panic. I see it, but it is not me." You transform into a grey rock for your own mind. You present your thoughts with a perfectly smooth, impenetrable stone surface. You do not react. You do not fight it. You simply watch it. You watch the thought rise, you watch it reach its agonizing peak, and you watch it inevitably crumble into dust. You create 1 single millimeter of empty space between the observer and the emotion, and in that tiny, microscopic vacuum, the ghost starves to death. The heavy iron doors of the arsenal are closing. The roaring fire in the forge is slowly dying down, turning into a deep, pulsating bed of blowing orange embers. The surgery is complete. I want you to physically feel your heart rate slowing down right now. Feel the cold, clean air filling your lungs. Look at the elongated shadows stretching across the ancient stone walls of our citadel. You have just taken your very first step toward absolute psychological invulnerability. You look the ghost directly in its empty eyes and realize that it is woven from nothing but smoke and cheap biological inertia. The boy in the plastic bubble is dead. The victim has been executed. But do not dare to relax your posture just yet. Killing the ghost inside your own head is only the first easiest step, because the world outside this archive is swarming with the ghosts of other people. The matrix of society is meticulously designed to constantly infect you. They will attempt to project their own fears, their own anxieties, and their own pathetic mediocrity directly onto your armor. They will try to poison you with their biological Wi-Fi. Today, you learned how to control your own mind. But tomorrow, I will show you exactly where the poison of other people comes from and how it burrows under your skin. And believe me, you are not going to like what lies at the bottom of their souls. But that is a lesson for Room 2. Your empathy is not a gift. It is an open, festering wound through which you greedily absorb the psychological vomit of other people every single day. You convince yourself that you are simply tired of society. You call yourself a sensitive soul, but this heavy, viscous lead in your chest does not belong to you. You are nothing but a defenseless biological antenna, continuously downloading foreign panic, raw aggression, and toxic neuroses directly into your own bloodstream. Today, I will dissect your biological vulnerability. I will teach you the ancient art of absolute impenetrable indifference, and I will show you how to forge a neurobiological shield so that their poison consumes no one but themselves. You naively believe that you are the master of your own mind, but the moment your boss raises his voice or a relative shoots you a toxic, passive-aggressive glance, your entire consciousness instantly shatters. You pay with your physical health for the unhealed traumas of people who do not care about you at all. You have voluntarily become a flawless, walking trash receptacle for the madness of others. Let us strip away the romantic, poetic illusions of human connection. To understand why you are constantly exhausted by the mere presence of other people, we must cut deep into the cold, unforgiving meat of your evolutionary neurobiology. Deep inside your cerebral cortex lies a highly specialized cluster of cells. Modern science calls them neurons. These are not tools of compassion. They are an ancient, brutal, mechanical survival mechanism. Millions of years ago, when our ancestors roamed the hostile primeval jungles, individual thinking was a death sentence. If one primate saw a predator and began to panic, the mirror neurons of the entire pack instantly downloaded that exact same panic. They did not analyze the threat. They did not ask questions. They just synchronized their nervous systems and ran. Emotional contagion is what kept the tribe alive in the dirt. But you are no longer in the jungle. Let us drag this sterile science down to your miserable daily reality. You walk into your sterile, fluorescent-lit office. The temperature is regulated. You are perfectly safe from predators. But a coworker walks in, vibrating with neurotic anxiety about a meaningless corporate deadline. Or your partner returns home radiating a silent, suffocating, passive aggression over a minor inconvenience. What happens to your brain? Your primitive mirror neurons do not know that you are in the modern world. They scan the facial micro-expressions, the elevated tone of voice, the aggressive body language, and they immediately identify it as a lethal physical threat. Your nervous system bypasses your logical mind entirely and automatically downloads their neurosis straight into your central nervous system. You absorb their cortisol. Your heart rate spikes. You feel their irrational fear as if it were your own. It is a biological Wi-Fi connection, and you have left it completely unprotected. You have left it wide open without a password. You are letting every sick, infected mind in your vicinity connect to your hardware and run their malicious software on your battery. But we must push the iron scalpel even deeper. We must look at the dark, uncompromising wisdom of the East. The masters of the Dark Zen tradition understood this neurobiological hijacking thousands of years before the first brain scan was ever invented. They understood a fundamental, terrifying truth about human nature. Absolutely everything that people say to you, everything they scream at you, every toxic insult and every unreasonable demand has absolutely nothing to do with you. It is a pure, unadulterated projection of their own broken reality. When someone insults you, they are not describing your flaws. They are broadcasting the agonizing, rotting architecture of their own internal hell. They are acting exactly like the hungry ghosts of ancient Buddhist mythology, the preta, miserable wandering entities with bloated stomachs and needle-thin necks, forever starving, forever desperate to inflict their insatiable emptiness onto someone else. They are vomiting their unhealed psychological trauma onto the floor. And what do? Look at the monstrous arrogance of your fragile ego. You take everything personally. You literally drop to your knees on the filthy floor, gather their acidic, burning vomit with your bare hands, press it deeply into your own chest and say, "This is mine. I deserve this. I must process this." I want you to visualize the absolute visceral horror of this interaction. Every time you internalize someone else's rage, imagine a black, oily, parasitic worm crawling out of their mouth. And instead of stepping back, you open your own mouth and swallow it whole. You let their infection nest inside your stomach. You let their sickness become your identity. I am looking directly at the cracks in your armor right now. You think your hypersensitivity makes you a good person. It makes you a victim. It makes you a pathetic, porous sponge, soaking up the filthy water of a dying society. You are drowning in an ocean of other people's ghosts, simply because you are too cowardly to close the heavy iron gates of your own fortress. I know exactly what is happening to your physiology right now. I can see your jaw clenching. Your ego is violently resisting this diagnosis. You just remembered a specific comment on the internet that ruined your entire day yesterday. You remembered the condescending tone of a manager that kept you awake at 3 a.m, endlessly arguing with a phantom in your head. Your hand is reaching for the mouse right now. You want to pick away. Your ego is terrified of admitting that it has acted as a public garbage can for anonymous cowards and toxic relatives. You want to escape into a mindless algorithmic feed to numb the discomfort. Look at me. Look straight into the darkness. Leave the mouse alone. Do not look away. We are not finished. Every single time you react, every time you justify yourself, every time you scream back, every time you silently swallow the insult and let it ruin your day, you are actively completing their neurobiological circuit. You are giving the predator exactly what it is starving for. The validation that its poison is potent. The confirmation that its sick reality can successfully infect yours. You cannot change their broken reality, but you can absolutely destroy their ability to transmit it to you. We must forge your shield. We must integrate the ruthless discipline of Stoicism with the detached, dead observation of Dark Zen. You must master the neurobiological weapon known as the grey rot. When a toxic arrow of panic, aggression, or manipulation is fired at you, your instinct is to raise a shield and fight back. Do not fight back. Fighting implies resistance, and resistance requires massive amounts of energy. Instead, you must become the void. You must become a cold, smooth, impenetrable piece of grey mountain stone. When the aggressor screams, when they attempt to establish their biological Wi-Fi connection, your job is to give their mirror neurons absolutely zero feedback. You drain all emotion from your face. You flatten your voice into a dead, monotonous line. You become the most uninteresting, unresponsive, empty object in the room. The aggressor's brain is desperately searching for a reaction to feed on. They want your mirror neurons to fire. They want to see your pain to validate their own. But when they look at you, they hit a solid wall of nothingness. Connection error. By refusing to react, you deny them the neurobiological feedback loop. Their toxic energy has nowhere to go. It bounces off your cold stone surface and returns directly into their own nervous system. You watch them choke on their own poison. You watch their infection devour them from the inside out, while you stand there, completely untouched, unharmed, absolute. The heavy iron doors of the arsenal are closing. The flames of the forge have cooled into deep, silent embers. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel the crushing weight of the world's neurotic noise sliding off your armor. Feel the cold air entering your lungs. Tomorrow morning you're going to walk into a room completely overflowing with hysteria, manipulation, and panic, and you will remain absolutely, terrifyingly still. You will look at the frantic, screaming ghosts around you, and you will finally realize that their suffering is not your property. You have severed the connection. You are sovereign. Finish your dark, bitter tea. Let the astringent warmth ground you in the brutal reality of your newly fortified borders. But do not celebrate just yet. You have successfully learned how to defend your fortress from the demons outside. But what are you going to do with the demons that are already locked inside with you? What are you going to do about the insatiable, agonizing desires that tear you apart in the middle of the night? The obsessive cravings for success, for pleasure, for cheap dopamine that make you utterly weak and predictable. Tomorrow, we are going to take a very long walk down into the deepest, dampest basements of your dopamine system. And believe me, it is incredibly dark down there. But that is a lesson for room 3. You wake up in a cold sweat not because your real life is collapsing. You wake up this way because your own brain has just generated a hyper-realistic simulation of your execution, and you completely believed it. You call this planning. You convince yourself that endlessly running the worst-case scenarios in your head makes you cautious and prepared for the brutal blows of fate. But your so-called preparation is merely a symptom of severe cognitive schizophrenia. You are utterly exhausted because you spend colossal amounts of your vital energy fighting enemies that do not physically exist. Today, I will force you to look directly into the eyes of the hallucination you have grown inside your own skull, and I will show you exactly how to slit its throat. Do not look away. You think you are in control of your life when you lie in the dark at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling, desperately trying to calculate every single move for the next 5 years. But every time you are left alone with the silence, you feel it. That sticky, primal, animalistic fear. The fear of the absolutely uncontrollable chaos of tomorrow. You run from this fear into your work, into physical exhaustion, into the cheap digital dopamine of your screens, just to silence the noise. To kill a ghost, you must understand the exact chemistry from which it is woven. Let us look at the architecture of your fear through the sterile, unforgiving lens of evolutionary neurobiology. Deep inside the temporal lobe of your brain lies an ancient almond-shaped cluster of cells called the amygdala. This is your evolutionary radar for terror. Millions of years ago, it kept your ancestors alive in the dirt. But today, this primitive structure is your absolute greatest curse. Why? Because your amygdala is totally, completely blind. It has absolutely no concept of time. It does not know the difference between the past, the present, and the future. And most terrifyingly, it is biologically incapable of distinguishing physical reality from a vivid hallucination painted by your cerebral cortex. Let us drag this laboratory science down to the filthy floor of your daily reality. You are sitting in your apartment, you are perfectly safe. It is warm, it is quiet, the walls are thick, but suddenly you begin to imagine being fired from your job in 6 months. Or you imagine your business collapsing and losing everything you own. Or you picture your health suddenly failing. What does your brain do in that exact second? Your amygdala does not understand that this is merely a hypothetical projection of the future. It reads that visual image as if a real, physical predator is tearing out your throat right now, in this exact room. It instantly sounds the alarm and issues a ruthless command to your adrenal glands. Your body is immediately flooded with a massive toxic dose of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart begins to pump blood violently. Your muscles spasm. Your breathing becomes shallow. You are physically, cell by cell, living through a catastrophic event that does not exist anywhere except as meaningless electrical impulses trapped between your ears. You are not simply feeling nervous. You are currently engaged in a slow biological suicide. The chronic release of cortisol over fabricated imaginary stress is highly neurotoxic. It literally burns away the cells of your hippocampus, the center of logic and memory. And worst of all, this cortisol physically enlarges the amygdala itself. You are literally training your brain to become a more efficient machine of terror. You are building a flawless, unbreakable prison of chemical panic inside your own head with your own hands. But we must push the iron scalpel even deeper. We must consult the merciless, crushing philosophy of Dark Zen. Forget the Western illusion of controlling your fate. We must look at the concept of Maya, the grand, suffocating illusion of reality. From the perspective of the dark Buddhist tradition, the future does not exist. It is shunyata. It is the absolute void. It is a completely empty room. And yet you stand in front of this empty void, swinging your fists, desperately fighting shadows that have no mass, no weight, and no reality. You view yourself as a tragic victim of a cruel world, but the truth is that you are a highly sophisticated masochist. You voluntarily take out a massive loan on suffering with a colossal interest rate. The tragedy has not even appeared on the horizon, and it will likely never happen. Yet you are already paying for it with the full bleeding currency of your nervous system. It is a financial pyramid scheme of pain, and you invest your peace into it every single day. I want you to visualize the physiological reality of what you are doing to your own body right now. Imagine that you are lying on a perfectly clean, white hospital bed, but inserted deep into your vein is a thick medical needle, connected by a tube to a massive IV bag. And this bag is not filled with medicine. It is filled with thick, black, boiling battery acid. Every single time you imagine your future financial ruin, every time you mentally rehearse a scenario of betrayal or humiliation, your own hand reaches up to the valve of that IV drip. You press the button yourself, and a fresh dose of black, burning cortisol acid pours directly into your bloodstream, searing your veins and traveling straight to your heart. The world is not hurting you. No one is standing over you with a rusted knife. You are the one holding your finger on the valve. You are pumping yourself full of poison while sitting in a completely safe room. This is the true body horror of your daily existence. You are suffering from a phantom amputation. Your life is entirely intact, yet you are screaming in agony, staring at a wound that is not even there. This is the ultimate illusion of control. The harder you try to secure your hypothetical tomorrow by obsessing over catastrophes, the more chaos and panic you inject into your actual today. The desire for absolute security generates absolute anxiety. Your bloated, arrogant ego thinks that if it rehearses the worst-case scenario 100 times, it will be prepared for the blow. That is a lie. You are not preparing. You are simply training your nervous system to be weak, exhausted and broken long before the battle even begins. I can see your jaw clenching right now. I can feel your mind beginning to melt from the sheer discomfort of this truth. You just remembered the exact problem waiting for you next week, and your hand instinctively twitched toward the mouse. You want to minimize this window. You want to open another tab, escape into the endless, numbing feed of short videos, and bury this tension under a mountain of cheap digital garbage. Your ego is terrified of admitting that it is the one pumping the acid into your veins. Take your hand off the mouse. Look me directly in the eyes. We are not finished. If you run away right now, you are confirming that you are nothing but an obedient, domesticated slave to your blind amygdala. Sit in the fire. We must forge your emergency brake. You cannot defeat the future because it is not real. You cannot punch a ghost in the face. To stop the panic, you must apply the most violent, ruthless instrument of Dark Zen, the forceful, uncompromising return of your attention to the absolute now. This is not some cheap, esoteric meditation. This is a brutal neurobiological surgery. When you force the focus of your attention onto the heavy gravity of your body, onto the freezing air entering your lungs, onto the rough texture of the wood beneath your fingers, you literally, physically sever the power cable to your amygdala. You forcefully hijack the electrical activity of your brain, ripping it away from the limbic system of animal fear and slamming it directly into the prefrontal cortex of cold logic. You shut off the acid valve. When the phantom of tomorrow approaches, you do not argue with it. You do not tell yourself that everything will be okay. You look at it and you state you do not exist, and you clench your fist. You feel the crushing, undeniable weight of physical reality. Your absolute now is the only place in this entire universe where you hold any real power. The heavy cast iron doors of the arsenal are slowly swinging shut. The roaring fire in the furnace is settling into a deep, pulsating bed of glowing orange embers. The surgery is complete. I want you to physically feel the level of cortisol dropping in your bloodstream right now. Feel the tight muscles in the back of your neck finally releasing. Look at the elongated shadows resting motionlessly on the cold stone floor of our citadel. In this exact second, in this specific space, there are no catastrophes. There are no bankruptcies, no diseases, and no failures. There is only you, your deep, rhythmic breathing, and the cold, unyielding stone. You have just realized that the vast majority of your suffering is nothing but cheap computer graphics generated by your evolutionary autopilot. You have learned how to rip the acid drip out of your own vein. You have learned to leave the future exactly where it belongs, in the void. Finish your dark, thick tea. Allow its bitter taste to ground you entirely in reality. Your amygdala is no longer your master. But do not dare to relax your posture. Today you learn how to slaughter the phantoms of the future. You stopped bleeding for things that have not yet happened. But what are you going to do with the ghosts of the past? What will you do with the deep, genuine scars, the lingering resentments, and the unforgiven debts that lie rotting in the basement of your memory, secretly dictating your every move? The past is already dead, yet its rotting corpse still has its hands wrapped tightly around your throat. Tomorrow, we are going to take our shovels and walk directly into the graveyard of your memory. And we are going to dig up the things you have been desperately hiding from yourself for years. But that is a lesson for room 4. Your chronic exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It is not the result of hard work. It is the biological price you pay for your sick, delusional megalomania. You convince yourself that agonizing over every possible variable in your life makes you a responsible adult. You call it being prepared. But your endless obsessive worrying is not preparation. It is an arrogant systemic attack on your own nervous system. You are completely drained because you spend all your vital energy trying to manage a universe that does not belong to you. Today, I will surgically remove your God complex. I will show you why surrendering control is not a defeat, but the ultimate form of predatory energy conservation. Do not look away. You think you're in control of your reality. You wake up, you check the news, you monitor your bank accounts, you attempt to calculate the exact reactions of your colleagues, your partner, the economy. You believe that if you just think hard enough, you can force the chaotic, raging machinery of the world to align with your personal desires. And when it doesn't, you break down in pure panic. You run to cheap dopamine to numb the realization of your own powerlessness. Today, we are going to dissect the absolute arrogance of your control, and we will do it using the cold, brutal limitations of your own biology. To destroy your illusions, we must look at the mechanical engine of your arrogance. We must look at your prefrontal cortex. This small area behind your forehead is the center of logic, planning, and prediction. It is also the single most metabolically expensive organ in your entire body. It runs exclusively on glucose. Every time you calculate a variable, every time you attempt to predict the future, you are burning highly valuable biological fuel. Let us drag this sterile science down to your filthy living room couch. It is late in the evening. You are physically exhausted from the day. But instead of resting, you lie there and begin to run complex simulations in your head. You try to predict exactly what your boss will say tomorrow. You try to calculate how the macroeconomic collapse will affect your investments in 5 years. You analyze the hidden meaning behind a text message you received 6 hours ago. You have absolutely zero physical control over any of these things. But your brain does not care. Your prefrontal cortex is desperately rendering hyper-realistic 3D models of fake scenarios, burning through your glucose reserves as if you were running a physical marathon. You are burning the premium fuel designed for real physical survival today, wasting it on the ghostly phantoms of tomorrow. And what happens the next morning? You wake up completely paralyzed by what neuroscientists call allostatic overload. Your human brain has a strict, hardwired limit on how many variables it can process. When your bloated ego tries to control the global economy, the opinions of your ex-partner, and the randomness of the future, all at the exact same time, you are literally launching a DDoS attack against your own mind. Your operating system crashes. You enter a state of total analytical paralysis. Instead of taking one single useful physical action in the real world like sending an email or going to the gym, you sit frozen in your chair, completely crushed under the gravitational weight of your own useless calculations. You became biologically stupid because you spent all your RAM trying to organize chaos. We must push the iron scalpel deeper. We must look at the dark, unforgiving philosophy of Stoicism and the ancient wisdom of Zen. Let us address your cosmic megalomania. Look down at your own hands. You do not even control the biological vessel you inhabit. You cannot command your heart to beat faster through sheer willpower. You do not consciously control the division of your cells, the filtering of your kidneys, or the digestion of your food. You are nothing but a temporary, fragile biological tenant inside a meat machine that runs completely on autopilot. If you do not even possess the authority to control your own stomach, what kind of sick, delusional arrogance makes you believe you can control the thoughts of other human beings? What makes you think you can control the chaotic trajectory of the universe? Your attempt to manage the world as a god complex performed by an insect. I want you to visualize the visceral, pathetic reality of what you are doing. Imagine a Category 5 hurricane, a monstrous roaring apocalypse of wind and rain that is ripping ancient trees from the earth and tearing houses to shreds. And right in the dead center of this unimaginable chaos stands you. You are dressed in a formal tuxedo. In your hand, you hold a tiny, fragile wooden conductor's baton. The wind is literally tearing the skin from your face. Heavy chunks of flying concrete are shattering your ribs. And yet you stand there, desperately waving your little wooden stick, screaming at the top of your lungs, commanding the hurricane to play by your sheet music. Your frantic waving does absolutely nothing to stop the wind. The hurricane does not care about your baton. Your attempt to control the storm does not save you. It merely guarantees that your death will be as exhausting and pathetic as possible. The Dark Zen masters called this opadana, the sickness of clinging. The world is a violent, freezing mountain river, and your attempt to control your life is like trying to hold that raging water inside a tightly clenched fist. The harder you squeeze your fingers, straining every muscle and tendon to the point of agonizing cramps, the less water you actually hold. The river flows anyway. The only person you are torturing with that violent spasm is yourself. I can feel your ego resisting me right now. Your jaw is tight. You hate hearing that you are powerless. Your hand is slowly moving toward the mouse. You want to close this tab and go watch a motivational video that tells you you are the master of your destiny and that you can manifest anything. You want to be lied to. Take your hand off the mouse. Leave the phone on the table. Look directly into the darkness of this screen. If you run away now, you are choosing to be crushed by the hurricane. Sit in the fire. We are going to forge your weapon. True power is not found in controlling the universe. True power is found in the dark Taoist concept of Wu Wei, the art of predatory inaction. I want you to look at a Bengal tiger hiding in the tall grass, waiting for its prey. The tiger does not attempt to control the direction of the wind. It does not try to change the rotation of the sun or manage the flight paths of the birds above it. It surrenders complete control of the entire jungle. It remains in a state of absolute dead stillness. Why? because the tiger is conserving 100% of its biological energy. It does not waste a single drop of glucose fighting variables it cannot change. It accepts the chaos of the universe, drops the illusion of control, and funnels every single ounce of its terrifying power into one single localized action: the strike. When you surrender your need to control the future, you are not giving up. You are not being passive. You are entering the ultimate state of predatory energy conservation. You stop waving the baton at the hurricane, and you finally use that energy to build a shelter. The heavy iron doors of the arsenal are sliding shut. The roaring heat of the forge is slowly dying down, leaving only the deep pulsing glow of orange embers. The surgery is complete. I want you to physically feel the suffocating tension leaving your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Relax your fists. Let the illusion of control fall to the cold stone floor of our citadel. In this exact fraction of a second, there is nothing for you to manage. The economy will fluctuate without your permission. Other people will make their own irrational decisions without your input. The hurricane will continue to rage. And for the first time in your life, you will let it. You have learned to drop the wooden baton. You have learned to stop bankrupting your prefrontal cortex on problems that do not belong to you. You are no longer the victim of the storm. You are the silent, untouchable observer standing perfectly still in the eye of it. Finish your dark, bitter tea. Let the astringent taste ground you in the brutal, beautiful reality of your own limitations. But do not relax your guard just yet. Today, you learned how to stop fighting the external chaos of the world. But what happens when the chaos is entirely internal? What happens when the things you are trying to control are the dark, suppressed, rotting memories of your own past? You can surrender to the wind, but can you surrender to the monster hiding in your own basement? Tomorrow, we are going to take a lantern and walk down into the absolute darkest corridors of your Jungian shadow. We are going to meet the parts of yourself that you are most terrified of, but that is a lesson for room 5. Your trauma is not a life sentence. It is a temporary, pathetic chemical spasm. You convince yourself that your heartbreak, your failures, and your depression are unique, permanent curses handed down by an unforgiving universe. You wear your suffering like a heavy, rusted iron crown. You parade your unhealed wounds around, secretly hoping the world will finally recognize how uniquely you have suffered. You believe your pain will last forever, but your emotional eternity is a biological impossibility. Today, I will teach you the ancient alchemy of decay. I will show you exactly how to let your suffering rot. Do not look away. You chase triumphs thinking they will bring you permanent peace. You run from losses thinking they will permanently destroy you. But every single time you reach the peak or hit the bottom, the feeling inevitably mathematically fades. You're trapped in a primitive biological loop, completely oblivious to the cold mechanical nature of your own mind. Today, we're going to dissect the absolute law of impermanence, and we will use the cold, unforgiving meat of your neurobiology to completely dismantle your ego, to destroy your obsession with the past and your paralyzing fear of the future. We must look at the hardwired mechanics of your brain. We must look at the science of receptor downregulation. Deep inside your central nervous system, your neurons are equipped with highly sensitive chemical receptors. When you experience a massive psychological blow, a humiliating public failure, a devastating breakup, a terrifying financial crisis, your brain is instantly flooded with a toxic, burning tsunami of cortisol and adrenaline. The pain feels absolute. It feels endless. You feel as though you are drowning in boiling water. But your biological machine is infinitely smarter and far more ruthless than your fragile ego. It views your extreme emotional states, whether it is the manic, euphoric high of a massive victory, or the crushing, suffocating despair of a failure, as a lethal neurotoxin. It knows that if it sustains this level of intense chemical firing, the hardware will literally burn out. Your synapses would fry, your heart would give out, and your organism would collapse. So what does it do? It forcefully protects itself. It initiates a process called downregulation. Your brain physically retracts, destroys or blocks its own receptors to numb the impact. It forcefully shuts the system down. It literally lowers the volume of your suffering on a cellular level, dragging you kicking and screaming back into the cold, boring reality of baseline homeostasis. Let us drag the sterile laboratory science down to your filthy daily reality. Neuroscientists have extensively studied individuals who have won millions in the lottery, and individuals who have been permanently paralyzed in horrific physical accidents. You think the lottery winner is happy forever? You think the paralyzed man is miserable forever? You are completely, demonstrably wrong. Within 6 to 12 months, both individuals return to their exact previous baseline of everyday happiness. It is called hedonic adaptation. Your brain is a ruthless, mechanical thermostat. Emotion is nothing but a biological fire alarm. It is designed to flare up, force you to pay immediate attention to a change in your environment, and then inevitably, mathematically, shut itself off. A fire alarm that rings forever will only drive the organism insane. Whatever agony you are experiencing right now is already being chemically dismantled by your own cells. This too shall pass is not a cheap, comforting quote found in a self-help book. It is the cold, unbreakable law of neurological physics. We must push the iron scalpel even deeper. We must look at the dark, uncompromising philosophy of Zen and the brutal deconstruction of Stoicism. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius practiced the alchemy of decay. When his servants brought him the finest vintage wine, he looked at it and stated, "This is nothing but the squeezed juice of rotting grapes." When he wore the royal purple robe of the empire, he reminded himself, "This is just the hair of a dead sheep, smeared in the infected blood of a shellfish." We must apply this exact same violent deconstruction to your deeply personal emotions. Your profound existential crisis, which feels so incredibly unique and poetic to you, is just a temporary fluctuation of sodium and potassium ions in your synapses. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood this biological curse perfectly. He stated that human life is a heavy iron pendulum, swinging endlessly between pain and boredom. When you lack something, you are in agony. The exact second you finally achieve it, your brain downregulates the dopamine, the magic vanishes, and you are plunged right back into agonizing boredom. You will never arrive at forever. There is no final destination where you finally get to rest. The Dark Zen Buddhists call the fundamental law of the universe Anicca, absolute, unavoidable impermanence. Absolutely everything in this universe is in a state of continuous decay. I want you to imagine your own mind as a flawless, heavy sculpture carved from thick, white, melting wax. A tragedy strikes. A rusted blade violently slashes across the face of the sculpture. Your ego screams that this is a permanent disfigurement. It screams that your life is ruined, but the wax is hot. It is slowly, inevitably flowing. Right before your eyes, the deep, ugly gash fills in, smooths over, and becomes a blank, dead surface once again. You could not keep the scar open even if you tried. Your biology will not let you, and yet, look at the visceral, horrific reality of what you actively do with your pain. I want you to imagine your emotional trauma as a dead animal lying on the side of the road. The law of nature dictates that you should leave it there. Let the insects consume it. Let it rot, disintegrate, and return to the cold earth. Let the emotion naturally die. But you do not do that. You refuse to let it go. You pick up the rotting corpse of your pain and you drag it down into your dark basement. You take a rusted knife and you gut it. You hollow it out. You pack its empty insides with toxic artificial chemicals and you sew it back together with thick black thread. You perform a grotesque, desperate taxidermy on your own suffering. You turn your heartbreak, your resentment, and your failures into stuffed mounted trophies. And every single day you walk down into that dark basement, you look directly into the dead glass eyes of your taxidermied trauma, and you artificially force yourself to feel the agony all over again. The pain died years ago. The event is completely over. You are just choosing to live in a miserable museum of stuffed corpses because you are addicted to the familiar taste of your own misery. I can see your ego resisting this diagnosis right now. Your jaw is clenched tight. Your breathing is shallow. You hate this. You do not want to let the corpse rot because without your tragic backstory, without your unique, special suffering, you have absolutely no idea who you even are. Your identity is completely, pathetically fused with your stuffed trophies. Your hand is twitching toward the mouse. You want to close this video. You want to escape to a creator who will validate your trauma, who will stroke your hair and tell you that your pain makes you a beautiful, broken angel. You desperately want to be comfortably lied to. Take your hand off the mouse. Leave the screen exactly where it is. Look directly into the absolute darkness of my eyes. If you run away now, you are choosing to spend the rest of your natural life as a miserable gravedigger in your own mind. Sit in the fire. We are going to forge your weapon. True psychological invulnerability does not come from positive thinking. It comes from becoming a master of decay. When a massive crushing wave of anxiety, grief, or anger crashes into you, your first instinct is to cling to it, to analyze it, to write a tragic story about it, to mount it on the wall and show it to everyone. You must stop. When the chemical wave hits your nervous system, you will stand perfectly still. You will look at the emotion and you will state internally, this is a chemical spasm. It is already dying. You will observe the pain without touching it. You will feel the suffocating heat in your chest. You will feel the violent tremor in your hands, and you will do absolutely nothing. You will not write a tragic journal entry about it. You will not call a friend to endlessly complain about it. You will sit in the devastating silence and watch the chemical fire burn itself out to the very last ember. You will watch it reach its absolute agonizing peak, and you will watch your biology completely dismantle it. You do not fight the emotion. You simply deny it the artificial narrative chemicals it needs to stay preserved. You let it rot, and in that rotting, you find absolute, terrifying freedom. You become untouchable, not because you do not feel pain, but because you know with absolute cold certainty that the pain cannot survive. The heavy iron doors of the arsenal are dragging shut. The roaring heat of the forge is slowly dying down, leaving only the deep, pulsing glow of orange embers. The surgery is complete. I want you to physically feel the suffocating grip of your past slowly releasing your throat. Unclench your hands, relax your jaw. Let the taxidermied corpses of your trauma crumble into dry, meaningless ash on the cold stone floor of our citadel. In this exact fraction of a second, there is nothing for you to preserve. The triumphs that you desperately chased are already fading into nothingness. The tragedies that you thought would end your life are already dissolving into the void. And you are still here, unbroken, untouchable, sovereign. Finish your dark, bitter tea. Let the astringent taste ground you in the brutal, beautiful reality of your own biological impermanence. You have learned the mechanics of decay. You have learned to let the phantoms of your past and the anxiety of your future burn to ash. But do not relax your guard just yet. You have mastered the conscious mind. You have cleaned the basement of your memory. But beneath that basement lies an abyss, a dark, bottomless ocean of repressed desires, animalistic urges, and the terrifying, violent potential that you hide from the rest of the civilized world. Tomorrow, we are going completely off the map. We are going to dive into the absolute blackness of your unconscious mind. We're going to meet the monster you pretend does not exist. We are going to meet your Jungian shadow. But that is a lesson for Room 6. Taking a deep breath to relax is the most pathetic, domesticated lie modern psychology has ever sold you. You download a brightly colored meditation app. You sit on a soft cushion. You listen to the gentle sounds of a digital waterfall. And you take a shallow breath, desperately hoping that the universe will magically flood your body with peace and light. And what happens? Absolutely nothing. The moment you open your eyes, the crushing weight of reality slams back into your chest. The anxiety returns, sharper and more vicious than before. You feel like a failure even at breathing. Today we are going to strip the soft, poetic garbage away from this practice. I will show you what breathing actually is. It is not a tool for relaxation. It is a biological weapon. It is a violent, mechanical kill switch for your nervous system. Do not look away. You spend your entire day running. You run from tasks, from conversations, from your own thoughts. But when night falls and you finally lie perfectly still in your dark bedroom, the horror begins. Your heart begins to pound against your ribs. Your breath becomes shallow, rapid, and erratic. Your mind starts racing at a terrifying speed, generating scenarios of humiliation and ruin. You try to tell yourself to calm down, but your body completely ignores your conscious commands. You are a prisoner trapped inside a vehicle where the accelerator is pinned to the floor and the steering wheel has been ripped off. Today we are going to rip open the control panel of your physiology, and I will show you how to grab the emergency handbrake with your bare hands. To take absolute control of your meat machine, you must understand the hardware. You must look at the cold, unforgiving anatomy of the vagus nerve. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 gears. The sympathetic nervous system is the accelerator, the fight or flight response that dumps adrenaline into your blood and keeps you in a state of primal terror. The parasympathetic nervous system is the brakes. You cannot simply think your way into pressing the brakes. You cannot order your heart to slow down using logic. But evolution, in its cold mechanical wisdom, left a physical backdoor into the system. The vagus nerve is a thick, wandering biological cable that runs all the way from your brain stem down through your neck, across your chest, and wrapping tightly around your heart and your digestive organs. It is the master switch of your parasympathetic nervous system, and the only conscious way you can reach inside your body and pull that switch is through the mechanical movement of your diaphragm. Let us completely destroy the illusion of your anxiety, your panic attacks, your obsessive loops, your uncontrollable dread. I want you to visualize this anxiety not as a feeling, but as a living, physical entity. Imagine a grotesque, dark, wet parasite clinging tightly to your chest. It has sharp, needle-like teeth sunk deep into your sternum. This parasite does not feed on your blood. It feeds exclusively on oxygen, and specifically, it feeds on the fast, shallow, erratic breaths of a panicked host. Every time you take a short, terrified gasp of air, you are feeding the parasite. You are keeping it alive, fat and powerful. It throbs and pulses in rhythm with your frantic heart rate. To kill the parasite, you do not talk to it. You do not analyze its childhood trauma. You suffocate it. You must master the physiological sequence known as 4-7-8. This is not a relaxing yoga exercise. This is a neurobiological execution. You inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4. You are gathering the poison. Then you hold your breath for a grueling count of 7. This is the crucial moment. While you hold that breath, the carbon dioxide levels in your bloodstream begin to aggressively spike. Your brain registers this chemical shift and immediately realizes that panic is no longer a viable survival strategy. It is forced on a purely chemical level to prepare the body to power down. You are using the chemistry of your own blood as a heavy tranquilizer against your own amygdala. And then the execution. You exhale forcefully through your mouth, making a deep whooshing sound for a slow, agonizing count of 8. When you extend that exhale, when you push the air out slower than you took it in, your diaphragm physically expands. It pushes down and physically massages that thick biological cable of the vagus nerve. You are mechanically pulling the emergency handbrake. I want you to visualize exactly what happens to the parasite on your chest during this 8-second exhale. When you begin that long, deliberate out-breath, imagine that you are slowly lowering a massive, incredibly heavy, airtight glass dome directly over the parasite. The thick glass clanks heavily against your chest, sealing the creature inside. As you continue to exhale, counting 5, 6, 7, 8, you are systematically pumping every single molecule of oxygen out of that glass dome. You are creating an absolute vacuum. You look down through the thick glass. You look directly into the eyes of your anxiety. You watch it thrash. You watch it panic. It opens its mouth to scream, but there is no air left to carry the sound. You simply sit there, cold, detached, and absolutely still, and you watch the parasite slowly, inevitably suffocate in the vacuum of your extended exhale. You watch it wither, collapse, and die. You murder your anxiety in cold blood through the mechanical manipulation of your breath. But you must combine this neurobiological weapon with the merciless philosophy of Dark Zen. You must practice the ancient art of Maranasati, the meditation on a corpse. When you sit down to breathe, you do not do it to feel better. You do it to practice dying to the outside world. When you begin the 4-7-8 sequence, you must adopt the psychology of a corpse. A corpse does not have a mortgage. A corpse does not care what its boss thinks. A corpse is not worried about the macroeconomic collapse of society. A corpse is absolutely immune to the poison of other people. With every long 8-second exhale, you are blowing away another layer of your fragile identity. You strip away your name. You strip away your failures. You strip away your ambitions. You become nothing but a heavy, cold piece of biological matter, sitting in an empty room, mechanically ventilating its lungs. When you reduce yourself to absolute nothingness, there is nothing left for the anxiety to attach to. The ghost cannot haunt an empty house. I can feel your biological resistance peaking right now. Your chest is tight. Your breathing is shallow as you listen to my voice. The parasite senses that you are learning how to build the glass dome, and it is terrified. It is screaming at your ego to reject this. Your hand is resting on the mouse. You feel the deep, suffocating urge to scroll away, to open a new tab, to flood your brain with loud, meaningless digital noise. You are terrified of the silence. You are terrified of focusing on your breath because you know exactly what happens when the external noise stops. When you sit in silence, the trapdoor in your mind opens and the Jungian shadow begins to crawl up. All the repressed anger, the dark desires, the violent instincts, and the pathetic insecurities that you hide behind a fake civilized smile begin to rise to the surface. That is why you run. That is why you refuse to breathe. You are afraid of the monster in your own basement. Take your hand off the mouse. Leave the screen alone. Look directly into the black mirror. If you run away now, the parasite owns you forever. You will spend the rest of your life as a shallow-breathing coward, running from the shadows in your own mind. Sit in the fire. We promised you a meeting with your Jungian shadow. We promised that we would walk down into the absolute blackness of your unconscious mind. But if you walk down those stairs in a state of panic, your shadow will tear you to pieces and wear your skin. Your breath is the only armor you can wear into the abyss. The 4-7-8 rhythm is not a pillow. It is a heavy, rusted iron chain. And when your mind behaves like a rabid, foaming dog, desperately trying to drag you into the terrifying phantoms of the past or the future, you take that iron chain and you ruthlessly bind the rabid dog to the concrete pillar of the absolute now. You do not fight the dark thoughts that arise. When the demons crawl out of the basement, you do not argue with them. You simply tighten the iron chain. You return your focus to the harsh physical reality of the air scraping against the back of your throat. You lower the glass dome. You let the demons suffocate in the vacuum of your indifference. The heavy, massive iron doors of the arsenal are finally locking into place. The roaring fire of the forge has burned down to absolute quiet ash. The surgery is complete. The entire operation is over. We have walked through all 6 rooms of this citadel. We have dissected the default mode network and starved the ghost of your ego. We have forged the grey stone shield to block the toxic biological Wi-Fi of society. We have ripped the acid drip of future anxiety out of your veins. We have dismantled your megalomaniac illusion of control. We have practiced the alchemy of decay on your past trauma. And today, we have given you the heavy iron handbrake to stop the machine entirely. I want you to physically feel the weight of this armor settling onto your shoulders. Take a slow, agonizingly deep breath in through your nose. Hold it in the center of your chest. Feel the chemical shift. And now let it out slower than you took it in. Lower the dome. Finish your dark, bitter tea. There is no more liquid left in the cup. Let the cold, empty ceramic ground you in the brutal, beautiful reality of your absolute sovereignty. You are no longer a victim of your biology. You are the cold, detached operator of a highly sophisticated machine. You are the empty sky watching the storm. You are the predator waiting in total dead stillness. But do not make the fatal mistake of thinking the war is over. The war is never over. The world will continuously try to drag you back into the slaughterhouse. The Matrix will constantly try to plug you back into its sick, neurotic network. The parasites will always be waiting for you to take a shallow breath. You now possess the entire philosophical arsenal. You have the scalpel. You have the iron chain. There is nothing left for me to teach you. There is no more content to consume. If you stay on this platform looking for more motivation, you are betraying everything we have built. The screen is going dark for the last time. Stand up from this heavy oak table. Walk out of the shadows of the archive. Step out into the freezing, chaotic reality of the world. Take your throne. Execute.